YouTuber podcast, you gotta be a little OCD, so I get
Yeah, you
that.
gotta be a little crazy.
I totally
All
understand.
right, so Troy, it was once again, it was April 2021 when we had you on, and it was
Mhm.
then largely in part to introduce you, which you do with Previews World, and really kind of like kind of get some behind the scenes look into like the Previews World operation and Diamond and all that. But it was also to promote your MF Doom tribute comic at the time,
Yeah,
All
that's right.
Caps. How was the reception to that? I mean, did that lead to any new opportunities? I know I enjoyed the hell out of All Caps. I know I shared it on our
Mhm.
socials, but how
Thank
did
you,
everything
thank
turn
you.
out for that?
Yeah, like it's actually got a second life right now on
Hmm.
YouTube. It's kind of interesting what has
A motion
happened
comic, right?
recently. Yeah, like my buddy John B. John Holmes, like he's a filmmaker like me, and like but he's further along than I am, and he's got definitely has a history with the like video editing that like I am not even close to, and so he kind of saw the comic and was sort of like, hey, you want me to do something with this? And I was like, yeah, whatever you, if you want to, go ahead, man. Like, I don't know what that would look like. And he was like, well, what songs do you want me to use? And so I gave him like maybe two or three suggestions. And then he told me, he's like, you know what? I don't really know that much about MF Doom. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, well, he's like, I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna find some stuff that really works for the video. The music selections he made for that video, like, he's definitely a fan now. And the music selections he made for that video are actually kind of like spot on. There's almost something a subtext to each song that he kind of when he navigates through the motion comic. But yeah, we that motion comic's been up for a while too. That motion comic went up in 2021, but it's only like about what uh April, this past April, that like it just kind of
Hmm.
blew up all of a sudden. And like yeah, it's just begun a lot of traction. I did repost it because it used to be on my page, and then I posted it to a RexCo RexCo Comics YouTube page, and people have jumped all over it, man. It's like at 34,000 views, and everybody seems to love it. So that's been really
Dude, it's not
cool.
surprising, man.
Um,
It's solid. Like the comic itself was excellent. I love the artwork. I loved how concise it was. Like it was short, sweet, but like I felt like had a lot of heart to it. I could tell that like it was coming from
oh
someone
yeah,
that
yeah.
appreciated MF Doom and what he put into the world. So when I seen the motion comic, I was like, well, this is just the cherry on top, right? Like this is just even
Right, yeah.
more goodness to it.
All right,
And
yeah.
I'm to understand that I don't know if there's a direct correlation. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I understand that you went from paying homage to a rap legend that we, unfortunately lost like way too soon, to
Mhm.
eventually being able to team up with a rap pioneer that's still around,
Still with
respectively.
us. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
did all caps lead to working with Chuck D on that Apocalypse 91 Revolution Never Sleeps comic?
Yeah, yeah, it actually did. I had been bugging this Marvel editor named Chris Robinson for about 3 or 4 years about putting me onto something at Marvel, and unfortunately, he left the company, but he ended up taking up time at Z2 Comics for a period before making venturing out and making his own stuff. And he finally kind of came circled back, and I think it was, and I know for a fact it was because of the MF Doom
Oh,
comic.
cool.
He like kind of circled back to me. It was like, hey, you like rapping shit, right?
Boy, do I.
You're right. Yeah, yeah. Like he was. Yeah. I mean, actually, truthfully, it was more along the lines of. I think it was more along the lines of like, oh, okay, Troy might know like quite a bit about hip
Yeah,
hop.
yeah.
Like, let me anchor him into this. And also, I think the timing of just doing that and doing a Public Enemy book was also really good too. Um, yeah, and sure enough, like he pulled me into this Chuck D project called Apocalypse 91 Revolution Never Sleeps, which is supposed to be a sort of visual
Mm.
representation of the Public Enemy album, the Public Enemy album Apocalypse
Yeah.
91. And so it's an anthology series, and so I was kind of tasked with being the framing device for this
Oh, cool.
anthology, which was kind of right up my alley because I got to implement a DJ character who kind of really just sets the tone for the entire book.
Oh, like
Um,
so the equivalent of like a crypt keeper, right? Like the just keep the train
yes,
moving. A
exactly,
DJ.
exactly, yeah,
Damn,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a dope concept. A DJ kind of telling this anthology story of a Public Enemy kind of spiritual comic.
Right, yeah,
That's
yeah. And these things were like little, these were like, there were like little notes from Chuck D about what he wanted this intro to be. And, you know, his perspective was he wanted a doctor. He wanted it to take place in Los Angeles. And he wanted there to be some sort of segue to get us to the first story, the collection of stories that we're about to see in this book. And, you know, I was beating my head up against the wall for a while because I was like, a doctor? How do I swing that? Like, you know what I mean? And there was a very brief period where I had this thing about, like, you know, an ER doctor, and like some kid shows up in the ER and he's all shot up or whatever. It was a little too John Cena to me. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm just not that
Yeah,
guy. I
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
be honest. Like, like watching that stuff is one thing, but like, yeah, I just didn't have it in me to tell that type of story. And then it occurred to me, I was like, wait a minute, you can get a doctorate in music. So went in that direction instead, and I decided to go with this DJ in this Los Angeles radio
Mm.
station. In a very black community in Los Angeles, and kind of like that became the framing device, which was kind of fun to
So
do.
so you had a direct. So did you have direct, I guess, communication with Chuck D? Like, were you guys trading emails? Did you ever hop on a call or anything?
I actually missed I actually missed the phone call with
Oh
Chuck D.
no.
It's a true story. I like they made an appointment with
Hmm.
me, and I had this moment where I think I thought it was at a different time, and I was literally driving into work. I was going to Diamond, and Chris called me, and he was like, "Hey, what's up?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Oh, well, the meeting with Chuck." And I was like, "Oh shit."
Yeah, you stood up Chuck D. You
I
stood
guess I
up
did,
Chuck D.
man.
That I in a strange way, that's kind of
Yeah.
reflects it in its own way.
Oh man, so you know, I will say this though, his people, and you know, I don't know if how much he posts to his social media and the Public Enemy social media, but his people have been very supportive of my promotion, in particular of the book
Cool.
itself, which is I'm very grateful for. So you know, so it doesn't seem like any bad blood. You know, somewhere Chuck T's like, fuck that guy. No, he probably doesn't say that
Bro, you have
at
such
all.
an interesting, like, just career, man. I was when I was listening back to the first episode and just hearing all the different jobs you took prior to even, landing your role at Diamond and doing all the things that you do at previews. Um, you're definitely like, I joked about it in the intro, but you're definitely someone that is about it. You're right. Like you spend a mass majority of time talking about comics, interviewing creators, but your your comic creator side is man, it's definitely a career I would, if I was to ever dive into that world, I would love to have a career like yours where you're integrating your love of music and hip hop into like the
Yeah.
best visual medium out there.
Hmm. You know, that's one of those things where it's kind of a difficult thing to navigate, right? Because you know, with comics, you know, so okay, so like you look at music, right, and how it's implemented in comics, right? And sometimes you'll get like notes from a
Mhm.
song that kind of flow through the panel as a character's listening to it, or even lyrics from a song flowing through the panel as a character is listening to it. And so I've been really trying to figure out how to utilize this medium visually in a better way than just that. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm still trying to figure that out, to be real with you, but I think maybe the one of the things I have kind of zeroed in on was, you know, if I can get that energy from a particular song into the
Hmm.
page, then maybe that's the first part of it, you know. Like with the Apocalypse 91, the character's very literally telling you what the album is about, right? But at the same time, I'm listening to the album as I was writing this, so that energy is kind of playing into the panel itself. Like he's angry and he's hyped because the album is angry and it's hyped, you know. So you know, hopefully that comes across for sure. And with MF Doom, like yeah, it was the same thing. It was just sort of like, you know, we made a big stink about trying to get the sound of try to get the sound of the MF Doom sound on paper, right? And so, what does that look like? And Smack did a great job, and I gave him so many notes and so many Easter eggs to like input into every page. But really, just kind of was like, okay, what does the MF Doom sound like? MF Doom, what does the MF Doom sound look like? And in my mind, it was sort of like, well, it's like a Saturday morning cartoon on weed. Like that's where I'm coming from with it, you know. So let's
Okay.
just go
Yeah.
there, like, so yeah, it's a difficult thing, and I'm still trying to figure out ways. I got another project coming up, hopefully in 2024. Actually, no, I'm going to say in
There we
2024.
go.
Don't say
Manifest
hopefully.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. That hopefully will just be a culmination of these things as well. I've always written to music. I've always plotted to
Mhm.
music. I joke that like I am a soundtrack fiend. I have soundtracks to movies I've never seen, like original
Yeah.
scores. But they help me find the flow of a scene when I'm trying to build my story. I just saw a Hans Zimmer tribute a few weeks ago, and then a few weeks before that, I saw the Batman with the live
Oh,
orchestra.
that's
So
cool.
I'm very much big on you know trying to bring that sound to the page.
Yeah, Troy, I have yet Friday night I went to go see a Cowboy Bebop big band.
Ooh.
So they were performing
Oh
all the
man.
Cowboy Bebop music on
Yeah.
stage. It was a 10-piece orchestra. They had a projector in the back playing certain scenes, and it was such an awesome experience. They would play a little bit
Nice.
of
Yeah.
like the actual show on the projector, so that they'd be quiet, let a
Hmm.
scene play out, and then when it
Hmm.
would be time to like play the music, it would mute. They'd keep the captions on, and they would play the soundtrack or the score for that particular scene. And sometimes they would kind of cut it up. What do they call, like AVIs? Like, you remember the old
Hmm.
AVIs
Yeah.
on like YouTube? You'd find all like
Yeah.
That's where I heard like
Hmm.
Papa Roach. For
Right.
context
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
behind.
Like Lincoln Park to Dragon Ball
Exactly,
Z.
exactly. So, sometimes they would cut up certain scenes and whatnot.
Right.
Dude, it was awesome.
Yeah.
So I completely
Uh,
understand like the that experience and that joy of like using soundtracks to to do what you do, man. And at first, it, talk about one hell of a puzzle to solve. Like, it almost sounds like an
mhm,
oxymoron. What you said, what does MF Doom sound like, right? Like sound
mhm,
and visual representation. I
mhm,
think that's an
mhm.
interesting line to like straddle.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean that's always been the case. Like with my book Fighter of the Century, like I was listening to Ludwig Göransson and his Creed soundtrack and the Bill
Hmm,
Conti Rocky soundtrack, and because it's a fight comic, and so how does that flow and what does that feel like, and trying to translate that. And I think the people I've sent it to, they are responding to that because they can see the momentum of that first issue, which is really
that's
nice.
cool. I gotta recommend.
Yeah.
Tell me if you're familiar with this comic. Probably so, because I think it landed on the cover of one of either last month or the month prior, previous catalog. But have you heard of Deep Cuts from Image Comics? It's written by Joe Clark, Kyle Higgins. I think it's a 6-issue miniseries. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
jazz
Yeah.
focused.
Yeah.
Every issue tells a different like story of
Yes.
jazz and whatnot.
Uh-huh. Yep.
That first issue came
Uh-huh.
out April 26th. I picked it up. And it was also recommended it by a couple of friends. They know who they are.
Mhm.
And dude, I gotta recommend. I gotta say, with you having a knack for music and bringing and using that as a springboard for creating comics, I think you would enjoy Deep Cuts big time. Like, it
Okay.
is probably one of
Okay.
the best uh you use I'm sorry, it's probably one of the best comics utilizing and telling a story about like music and incorporating music. Hell, they got a music sheet at the end of the comic itself. It's awesome, man. I
Okay.
would check it out.
Actually, I just pulled it up because I was curious. I've seen the cover for this, and I remember the promotion for this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll check this out because it's one of those things where like you want to kind of find a new angle, but
Yeah.
you also want to steal from the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
There's also that aspect. There's a book right now called Ninja Funk
Oh yeah,
from
Whatnot Publishing.
Massive and whatnot.
Hmm.
Yeah, and they did something that I was like, why didn't I think of this? Which is that like it was about a bunch of DJs that are trying to save the universe from like bad music or something like that. It's a fun book, but they do this thing where like when they're about to fight somebody or whatever, you'll see a character lay a track down, and there's a little QR code inside
Oh,
the
that's
record
badass.
label, and so you scan the QR code, and then it takes you to like original music by the group Ninja Funk, and it's just really cool because it's making the comic experience fully interactive.
Yeah.
And like the comic book experience is interactive. I think that's one of the great things
Mhm.
about it is like you're as a reader, you're dictating the flow of it, you're turning the pages, like the suspense is in your hand. But here's another wrinkle to this where it's like, okay, now you can find the music that goes to this moment in the comic as well, which I think is really
That's
awesome.
cool. I'm a sucker for
Yeah.
utilizing or incorporating like modern technology with the reading
Hmm.
experience. And that just reminded
Oh
me
yeah,
of when Marvel had like their Marvel AR
yeah. I was thinking about that too. Yeah.
technology where like you would kind of stop.
Hmm.
I don't remember if it was the QR code, but it had like a little indicator like, hey, scan this
Yeah.
panel with
Hmm.
your phone with the app. And I would have a blast just like scanning it. And if it was like a planet exploding, it would be like a motion comic frame of it. You might get a VO.
Hmm.
But I have to check
Hmm.
out Ninja Funk. I didn't know about the QR code or music aspect, but that sounds right up
Yeah.
my alley.
Yeah. That's also something else on my pull list. Like I thoroughly enjoy that book. It's just a fun
That's
book.
cool. That's
And it looks cool too.
Troy,
Yeah.
what's your comic shop? I can't recall what you said when I first asked that, but where are you shopping at now?
So I'm in between two stores technically. So I go to a place called Alliance Comics and
That's
Games,
the
which
one.
is in downtown Silver Spring,
Okay.
and then I also go to Third Eye, which is in Annapolis, and both of them are like 30 minutes in opposite
Mhm.
directions. So, I kind of like hop around between those two. But if I'm in a new city, chances are I will go check out a
Always.
comic shop if I have
That is
time. Yeah.
always number one on my list. Anytime I go on vacation, I'm visiting, I'm stopping over in a city. It's hit a comic shop and then hit a record store. Those are my always go
Mm-hmm.
to like visits and whatnot. So
Mm-hmm.
Troy, I, how am I gonna frame this question? So Troy, with you visiting like two shops and then also working for a company that it's probably safe to say these two shops are closely like in business with, how
Mm-hmm.
often are you like hearing or talking to shop owners and workers and like hearing like their process, maybe their pain points, and like kind of just picking their brain and bringing that back to like previews? Do you do a lot of that, or at that point are you just kind of like, look, I'm here to enjoy the comics, pick up my pull, and like be a
No,
customer?
no, no. It's all marketing
Mm,
from my perspective. Like, I mean, that's kind of part of it. And I had a friend kind of compliment some of the stuff I'm currently doing because he was like, "You can tell that you've been working in comics and marketing for a
cool.
while." And I'm like, "Good. I would hope so. I hope I learned something from my time here." I just did a crossed over 8 year anniversary as working at
Oh,
Diamond.
cool.
But before that, like I was a store
Hmm.
owner. I just worked at a comic shop. I was a store manager. I'm sorry. I worked at a comic shop and I was doing indie books. I was going to the small press expo and stuff like that, just peddling my comics. So it's been like almost 20 years of this at this point. But from my perspective, it's all kind of informing, how to market to people. And so, and also I just like going to the shops and talking to people about like, oh, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you into right now? Like, how's business going and stuff like that. And people will tell you because, like, I mean, that's one of the great things about this industry is it's never, it's not cutthroat corporate world. It's not a cutthroat corporate world, right?
Yeah.
I know some people have opinions about Diamond and whatnot, but at the end of the day, it's not like I'm working for Amazon. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like I'm working for like Jeff Bezos or
Yeah.
something. Like, and so, people are willing to share information, and comic nerds in general are willing to be like, you know what I don't like. The thing that maybe you guys said on the show that I didn't like, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I think one of the things that sometimes I guess I want to say it's an admirable trait of mine, but it's also gotten me in trouble plenty of times. Is I'm kind of willing to talk to anybody if you're willing to talk to me. So that is kind of part of the experience of like figuring out what people want and how to market it to
Mm.
them. And I mean I'm still figuring it out. I'm not going to sit there and say I'm some sort of marketing genius. I'm not a John Hamm from Mad Men or
Yeah.
something like that. I'm just
Have you?
but
I guess I'm curious if
mhm,
you've ever gotten like an earful, maybe wrongfully at that. Like people
mhm.
hear you work for Diamond or see that you're the face of previews, and the correlation there. Have you ever just like been wrongfully like accused of something that on the business side or delivery? A shop gets
Oh
their
yeah,
delivery messed up or something like that, and they're giving
yeah.
you an earful like, well, Diamond does this and that. How could you guys do that? Have you ever just like gotten a earful like that wrongfully?
Oh yeah, just not directly at me, but just recently as last week. Like
Is that where the
that
tough
like
skin? Is
indirectly.
that where the tough skin comes from, Troy?
Yeah, indirectly. Like yeah, like I won't even get into it because it's still kind of
I guess
fresh, I
so.
guess. But look, there's a lot of there's a lot of I'm going to go back to my comment about not working for Amazon. There's a lot of people that want to view Diamond is this evil corporate overlord, and like even though the distribution field is pretty wide right
Oh yeah,
now,
big
right?
time.
Um, but in actuality, it's a family company, right? It's a family-owned company, and they definitely run it like a family-owned company. Like there aren't barriers between me and people on the executive level of this company as well. And people are pretty open. A lot of the people who work there are fans of comics, are fans of sci-fi, fantasy, all that stuff. It's very easy to kind of have a business meeting that kind of gets derailed into like, did you see Mandalorian this week? Like so
I
and
imagine the water cooler talks at Diamond are a lot more fun than my day job, where it's just random shit. I would love to be talking about Mandalorian people that know what's going on.
what's going on, right? And I mean, like I when I left the comic shop in early 2000s, I was like, I'm going to go into the corporate world. I worked at museums
Mm-hmm.
in Washington D.C. for a few years, and I mean, that was a good experience because it was my marketing. It was how I got into marketing, right? But at the same time, it's a different mindset, and a lot of those people are there because not necessarily because they love what they do. And I would much rather enjoy what I do and do something that's truthfully not important, if that makes sense. Like I'd much rather have a job where I'm doing something that's fun for
Yeah,
people and a distraction for people than like, I don't know, deciding the fate of the healthcare system in America.
yeah,
Like, you know what
yeah.
I mean? I don't want to do that. Like I shouldn't be the guy to make those decisions.
Well said. That's funny. So Troy, one of the projects, not like you need more projects to work on, but you're a
I know, right?
madman. You're a madman.
I'm a
One of the
madman.
new projects you're working on is this Create the Culture initiative, which I
Yes.
understand is meant to be more than just a hashtag. I see
Hmm.
that's described as it's the threat of a good time, and it has obviously
Right. Yeah.
direct ties into
Yeah.
RexCo's mission to continually curate colorful, explosive world championship storytelling across subgenres. Can you give us more context into the Create the Culture tag and how it stands on its own?
So, this is actually giving what we're doing at RexCo a very distinct personality. That's really what it boils down to. One thing I have noticed that a lot of comic companies will go, okay, they have a mission statement, right? And the mission statement is the same as the other company's mission statement, or the mission statement is very vague.
Mhm.
Like, I talked about a few years ago, the mission statement was diversity, equity, inclusion, which is great, right? But at the same time, once it kind of gets into this space where people are doing it from a corporate perspective, it becomes less
Mm.
authentic, right? And so, we kind of started RexCo truthfully right before the whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing really took a hold of the comic
Mm.
industry. And so our big brain idea was, hey, we're going to do comics with people of color. That was our big idea in 2015, right?
Groundbreaking,
And we
right?
thought, and we were like geniuses. We were like, this is great. No one's doing this. And then literally by the end of 2016, everybody was doing it.
Yeah, all the big publishers were looking like a
Right.
Benetton ad.
Right. Exactly. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like, Pepsi's doing it. It wasn't even comics. It was like Pepsi's doing it, Marvel's doing it, Disney's doing it. It was like everybody. And, we kind of just quietly rode that wave for a little bit. But the whole time in my back of my mind, I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want this to be our route because I'm seeing truthfully a lot of companies pop up and
Mhm.
disappear, and I'm seeing some companies ride this wave out. But then you look at the books that are being produced by these people, and it's like, okay, black character on the cover, but white people behind the
Hmm.
scenes, like like making the comic. And so, it really, and I've gotten flack for this, but like I really have an issue with uh, inauthentic attempts at this. And it's not to say that people of color have to always write people of color or white people can't write people of color. That's absolutely not true, you know. But it kind of transitioned into okay, what's the other extension of this? And it was like, okay, well, what are your personal tastes? Maybe we can start injecting that into the comic, and there is still an angle there that involves diversity, right? And so I started looking at the things that I personally have an affinity for, which is street art, street culture, um, graffiti, sticker culture, all that stuff, right? And like that really kind of became the genesis for this create the culture thing. Now, that is to say that at the end of the day, it can mean whatever you want it to
Hmm.
mean, right? That could be create the culture in your office environment. It could be create the culture in school. It could be create the culture at home. It could be create the culture in your studio, whatever you need it to be, right? But for us, it was a transition out of trying to being like, it was a transition out of having the exact same conversations as everybody else, because we kind of kept hitting this point where people would ask us like, well, what's it like to be a black person in comics? And it was just sort of like, everybody asks us that. And it's like, I'm tired of that
Hmm.
conversation, man. Like it just kind of got old, you
Yeah.
know. And it wasn't about the work, and that was the thing I think that really bugged me about a lot of this. Is like, okay, I appreciate you supporting us because of this thing, you know, because of this notion, this ideology, but you're not talking about the comic at all. You know, you're not talking about the thing I spent most of my time working on, which is the book itself. You know, and so I've always had this kind of concept of that, like, you know, maybe diversity, equity, inclusion isn't really the answer necessarily, but it's culture. And that culture is inviting, and culture is something that kind of brings people into the conversation instead of creating walls around it,
Yeah.
right? And so I've been trying to play. I've been playing with that idea for quite a while, and probably since 2017 when I realized everyone was doing, you know, the other thing. And I kind of hit a point where I was like, you know, yeah, culture does a lot. It does a lot of legwork. And once you ingratiate yourself to the culture, if you're an outsider looking in, if you ingratiate yourself to this culture, if you just shut up and listen and like understand why people do things in certain cultures, and it could be anything from like, you know, it could be Islamic, it could be, you know, graffiti, it could be sneaker
Mhm.
culture, it can be any of those things. But once you understand why people do it, that's the moment that like, you know, it becomes a lightning rod. That's the moment that it becomes something that like we can all share a conversation with and have a real meaningful conversation with. And so that was kind of like, that was ultimately the answer for it. But again, you know, that was me finding the inroads to making that pivot for RexCo. But ultimately, create the culture is whatever you need it to be, wherever you need it to be.
Wow. So it's not so much so a well, I mean, you tell me, but will
Hmm.
any? Because at first I was like, okay, is it a product? Is it going to be a line of series, a line of books? But it sounds like it is a refocus and a I won't even say rebrand because you know it's not like you guys are
No.
rebranding anything that at Rexco in particular, but a
Hmm.
refocus for the mission that you guys are going after, but maybe even more so a refocus and redirect for outsiders looking in. It doesn't sound like you guys are changing what you're doing at Rexco
Hmm.
in any major way, but maybe for outside looking in, now they've got something you know tangible to know what you guys are about outside of like the diversity and inclusion because that's a given, right? It's
Hmm.
like yes,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
right.
that
Exactly.
is a given.
Yeah.
This is
Hmm.
the mission right here, and I do like that you're utilizing it in a you know with a hashtag. I saw the promo clip as well. It sounds like you're also speaking about stickers too. You're you guys are offering that in a sticker form.
Hmm.
And it sounds like I don't know. It's concise, man. Create the culture is really concise.
Right. I mean, it's kind of it's very it's very decisive. Like it's very much like this is what we're trying to do here. Is like we want to create the conversation. You know, like I said, we were having these interviews and everybody was asking,
Mhm.
was the conversation had been created for us, right? And we're like, no, 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 no. We're going to create the conversation around our product. That's what we're going
Yeah,
to do. You know?
taking
Yeah.
the reins on what is being said or how your company is being viewed.
Right. And like, you know, like it's not a brand, you know, it's not a logo. It's, you know, or whatever, you know, helps
There
commodify
we go.
artistic effort, like, you know what I mean? It's not any of those things. I don't want anything to do with that. This is not meant to be a corporate spiel. That's not the angle I'm going for. Like, you know, it's, you know, the bomb is just the create the culture image is a bomb, which is supposed to be ironic, right? But that's also to kind of indicate, hey, at any time we could switch this shit up on you
Hmm.
guys. You know what I mean? Like it can be this right now, but at the end of the day, we're trying to dictate the conversation that we want to have. You know, so you know, there's a little bit of discomfort that I think is okay here. You know, and there's definitely a graffiti slant to it
Yeah.
because I've always been fascinated with that. Like, and you know, that's something that I kind of have my own personal experience with in terms of like I used to make sticker, like I used to take the priority mail stickers from the USPS office and you know stick them all over the city and stuff like that. I used to do that stuff and draw on them or whatever.
Sticker bomb. Yeah.
So yeah, right. And so that aspect is also there as well. But it's inviting you into the conversation and like just kind of like let's just get it, guys. Let's just have fun with this and let's do something crazy, like something explosive, something that might be a little bit of vandalism
Hmm.
in some regards. So yeah, I'm into that. That's where I'm at right now.
So now that you've brought this idea into the world, how is that going to, I guess, impact or move RexCo into the future? Like, how does that impact the lineup of books you guys have going on? Like, what is the future of RexCo looking like now that you've got this new initiative, this new refocus in place?
Well, you're definitely going to see a slant towards street culture in the near
Hmm.
future. Like that's definitely something that we're into. Street art. I already talked a lot about sneaker culture and graffiti and sticker culture and all that stuff. You're going to see a slant in that direction, and you're also going to continue to see an emphasis on music.
Cool.
The MF Doom comic really was a lightning rod for me because, like I said, I've always written to music and all in various types of music, but I would say the one staple has been movie scores and hip hop. Like that has been like the one thing that's been very consistent with me, and in terms of genres of music. And so you're going to start seeing more of that stuff in the near future. Like I'm working more directly with John, who did the MF Doom motion comic, and so he's got some stuff that he's chopping up for us that you'll start seeing in the near future. We have a new character named 808, who's a DJ from the future, who you will be seeing more and more in the near future as well. And she's going to be actually more, like you said before about the Apocalypse 91 character. She's going to be our crypt keeper.
Cool.
She's going to be the character that's really going to be introducing the world of RexCo and this new create the culture direction that we're going. So,
Dude, I'm excited, man. You guys are
yeah,
fulfilling a gap in comics that for me personally has me excited. Like the
yep,
marriage of, music, specifically hip hop, the DJ culture, graffiti and all that done right in comics. And I think that's what made the all caps comic, one of my favorite recent projects. And one of my favorite probably like hip hop related comic book thing was that it was done even if I hadn't met Troy, I would have been able to read that and know that the person behind it was genuine, was about the culture and like wanted to foster like this culture of this amalgam of things that like that I enjoyed a lot. I think that the
yep,
genuineness of it all is very apparent in the work that you guys do at RexCo. It isn't just like a cash grab. It isn't like a
yeah,
surface level diversity. Like you can go into any of your titles and really feel like that there's like some umph to it, like there's some like
yep.
genuine like meat to it, that you guys are about like are about creating the culture and pushing it forward and presenting it in an honest way. So if this new initiative is giving you a recharge, is putting new batteries in your back to put out more projects like
Yes.
all caps and
Yep.
Apocalypse 91, I'm really excited to see what you guys do.
Mhm. Even with Fight of Century, which was like the book that like we started back in
Mhm.
2016, you're going to see a pivot in that too in terms of like the overall feel and style of that book. Like it's going to be decisively more like rough and ready,
Okay.
and that's going to be a lot of fun too. So
And is the distribution means going to be, is that going to see a change as well? Because I know, you know, I know the some of these past
mhm,
examples that we're bringing up, all caps, that was a digital release. It was free, and then obviously it was put
mhm,
on the YouTube. So still kind
mhm,
of digital platform. And then
mhm,
I know Fight of the Century was in a recent previews catalog, so that was
mhm.
physical. But then Apocalypse 91 was also physical. So I guess like just distribution wise, are we going to see a good blend of digital and print, or are you guys thinking something completely different?
Actually, I will say, Fighter Century did not make it to previews.
Oh, okay. My
And
apologies.
so that's not because of previews. That's because of a whole bunch of other
Okay,
scenarios
okay.
that surrounding the situation. But that has not deterred us from continuing making the book. And so, but yeah, you're going to see a spread. I think that's the other part of this is like there's I forget who said it, but someone said that the medium is the message,
Hmm.
right? And so I've been thinking real long and hard about like, okay, where does this make the most sense? At one point in time, and I still kind of feel this way in some regard. Fight of the Century made a lot of sense for comic shops, right? makes sense at conventions and comic shops. Um, in the MF Doom comic, because A, he had passed away, B, I didn't want to like, I saw a lot of people capitalizing on his death by just creating merchandise right away,
Makes
and
sense.
I didn't want to have a part of that. And so we made sure that it was free, it was digital online, and that you could get a hold of. You can still get a hold of it. We will send you a PDF to your email if you go to our store. Um, and so that was another avenue. Apocalypse 91, the avenue was dictated to me, but at the same time, that's probably, the book market is the best possible avenue for that, And then the 808 thing, which I'm doing in the near future, which is not the title of the book, but that's the direction we're going. Is going to be across a bunch of things. It's going to be music videos. There's going to be stickers, and there is going to be a print medium aspect of this
Cool.
that we'll be dropping in 2024. So, also at the end of the day, like I'm really big on, and I think this actually has a lot to do with my experience in the small press, with the Small Press Expo in the past, but also got reinvigorated by the cartoonist kayfabe guys, which is like really kind of looking at the book and the print medium, how you can utilize it to tell a story in a very specific way, and that's not just in terms of what the artist is doing, but also the type of paper, like, how it gets to people, how it's distributed to people, really thinking about that as well. Like, and so I'm less concerned about, you know, large distribution and just kind of getting it into the hands of the people that want to see it, and that is the message. So that's part of it.
Troy, you're the right person to shake up the industry with some new shit, man. I mean, the position that you're
That's it.
in, working so closely with a company like Diamond and all the things that you not only do, but you're probably exposed to, and then like your own background with, you know, artistically speaking, to your artistic capabilities and inspirations. I think, man, I'm excited to see how you bring all of that together and push things forward because it sounds like you're asking the right questions of how do I really like create the culture and push this medium forward.
Hmm.
Which I feel like I should put you in touch with a good friend of ours here on the show. His name is Willie Evans. He's doing
Hmm.
some amazing things. He's a rapper, he's a DJ, and then recently he
Okay.
got into video production too. And the things that he's doing with all three of these things is really fascinating. And you bringing up the
Hmm.
QR code stuff, when we're done with this, I'll show you some of his work. But I think that,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
you guys should definitely talk.
Man, I'm talking to two DJs right now, and I will definitely talk to the third because we want to spread. Like, hip hop is not, when it comes to like, well, it comes to music in general, but hip hop in particular, it's not one thing. Like, you can go to trap, you can go to boom bap,
Yeah,
you can go in so many different directions with it. And so it's like, all right, yeah, let's get a nice widespread and kind of show the diversity of this genre as well.
well said. Speaking of independent publishers, I was flipping through this month's previous catalog, and once again,
Mm-hmm.
reminded by how many indie and new publishers have entered the arena and are just getting coverage, in the monthly catalog. And
Mm-hmm.
I try to keep a mental count. I just lost count because I suck at math. But the ones that I did take note of that feel fresh, exciting, and are hungry are, your Whatnot Publishing, Titan
Yeah.
Comics, A Blaze,
Mm-hmm.
AWA, Black Mask, which I'm really enjoying the stuff they're putting out on Black Mask. But you've also got companies like
Mm-hmm.
Dead Good Comics, Fair Square
Yeah.
Comics, Mad Cave,
Yeah.
and the list goes on and on and on. Is there any publishers, any particular one or two or however many that are either inspiring you from a creator standpoint or make you feel excited about being a fan and consumer of comics?
I am way big on Whatnot slash massive
Yeah.
publishing right now. It sounds like from the sounds of things, it looks like they're going to pivot to being massive and underneath Whatnot. But I am definitely like, I don't know how deliberate it is, but there is a street art aspect of it that I immediately respond to. I look at something like Ninja Funk and I see that. I look at something like Liquid Kill, I see stuff like that. And it's really exciting to see a publisher kind of, get into the comic shop space with that energy, I am one of those people, I miss Vertigo so
Hmm.
much. Like, you know what I mean? And Whatnot, massive Whatnot is not like Vertigo. It's its own thing. But I do miss that sort of like, left field nature of Vertigo where it's like, whoa, what is this? Like, you know what I mean? Marvel had that for a little bit in the early 2000s too, which is what got me back into comics as well, where it's like, suddenly Grant Morrison's writing new
Yeah.
X-Men, the Ultimates is coming out, and you're just like, whoa, this is not what I when I parted, this is not what these things were like, about
Yeah.
5 or 6 years ago. And so that stuff really grabs my attention. Like that's the stuff that makes me go, okay. I'm a big proponent of comics should be a little crazy. Like they should be a little off kilter and not anything like movies, not anything like comics. I'm not anything like television. It should be a little a little edgy. It should be more than a little edgy, truthfully. Like I'm one of those people that, I look at the history of EC Comics and I'm like, yes, that. Like, your kids should be looking at severed heads on the newsstand and just be like, oh God. And your parents should be concerned. I look at something like heavy metal and I'm like, the early days of heavy metal, I'm like, yes, that. That is the type of thing that you should be getting. That's what comics should be doing. Is it like it should not be definable by a movie rating system. Like, you know what I mean? It shouldn't be something that could be easily made into a TV show. It should be left field. And I feel that from Massive for sure. Um, I also like some of the stuff that the Blaze is doing. They're actually got a bunch of a manga line right now that is actually really interesting,
Yeah.
and they're doing some really cool stuff with that. They did a book called Zombie Makeout Club, which I had never heard of, and apparently it was a web comic, but it was under their manga line. That's another one that kind of made me just kind of like go, oh, hey, what is this? That's kind of cool. I like that. Um, and they've been doing a lot of stuff like that in general. Um, Beyond that, I think there's a lot of like little drips of interesting things there, and there's also like the guys who've always been doing the edgy stuff,
Hmm.
and always doing the like explosive stuff. I mentioned Mark Miller. Mark Miller's always going to be Mark Miller. I don't know why some of you guys want him to apologize for that. Like, if you don't like his stuff, just don't read the stuff. But for me, I love it.
He's a prime. His stuff is a prime example of, look, y- you know what you're getting into, all right? Like,
Yes.
if you,
Hmm.
the door's right there.
Right. Garth Ennis is still doing stuff. He's got a book coming out that I think is actually. I'm always into Garth Ennis stuff. I wish Grant Morrison would come back to comics again. I guess he's doing something with Liam Sharp soon.
Mm,
But that's this type of stuff. That's the type of stuff I really dig. I know Kyrie Randolph's got a new book too that I'm kind of curious about. Speaking of like a street art style.
okay. And I want to shift gears real quick to some of the content and stuff that you've been putting out on the Previews World YouTube channel, because
Hmm.
you have had one hell of a last year, hell, like a last couple of years when it comes to being able to rub elbows and interview and talk with some of the most celebrated creators in comic books. I was taking a look at the Previous World YouTube channel, and I noticed that some of these interviews. You've gotten a chance to talk with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, Brian Michael
Hmm. Yeah.
Bendis. I think Kevin Smith
Yeah.
was on the channel promoting his Masquerade book through Dark Horse
Hmm.
recently.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
in the latest previous catalog, you guys are teasing that a Frank Miller and Dan Didio, a multi-part interview is coming here
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah.
First of all, how was it to? Has that already been done? Have you already spoken to them?
Yeah. Yeah. We already did that. We did that interview back in September last year. We've
Oh
been
wow!
sitting on it.
Oh wow! Damn.
Yeah, we've been sitting on it.
Okay.
Like that was actually a return to form for us in terms of video content
Cool. Cool.
because
Cool.
the pandemic
Yep.
prevented us from doing a lot of this stuff. So it was like, all right, who can we get in Baltimore? They were at Baltimore Comic Con,
Cool.
so we're like, let's get a couple people and talk to them. We got them, and Ascenti, and Liam Sharp, and so
Awesome.
those are all
Awesome.
coming up over the summer.
What was it
Yeah.
like? How did you prep for someone like Frank Miller and Dan Didio,
You know
right?
what?
Like people who have years
Mhm.
of experience, years of content. I'm sorry, years of comics and titles and et cetera underneath their belt. Like, do you strictly focus on what they're currently doing, or from one interviewer to another? Troy, put me on the game, man. Like, how do you prepare for these giant comic icons and legends?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, man. I don't interview anyone that I'm not a fan of
Hmm.
already. Like that's the God honest truth. At least like when it comes to video interviews, like if I have to sit across from you and talk to you, I gotta be,
Yeah.
I have to be genuinely engaged in what you're
You
saying,
can't fake it
and
neither. When it comes to
you can't
video, you
fake it.
can't fake it.
Yeah,
But audio, you
yeah,
might be able to get away with it, right? You don't got
right,
facial
right, right,
expressions, but you're right. It's a little
right,
different
right.
with video.
But yeah, so with a lot of these interviews, like I wanted to interview Adam Warren, like you know what I mean. I wanted to interview Garth Ennis,
Mhm,
and so that stuff really boils down to like, okay, ask them the things that you always wanted to ask them,
mhm.
you know, and ask them the things. And every now and then I'll ask my friends or like people I know
Sure.
online. I'll be like, hey, what would you ask this person? But for a lot of the times, I just kind of am letting them talk and seeing what direction they go with the conversation, because ultimately they kind of tell you what they're interested in,
Yeah.
right? Like with Miller, he is very, I mean, clearly he's interested in the craft. Like, he writes, he draws, he's been doing this for a long time. And so, like, this interview was for his comic publishing company,
Mhm.
Frank Miller Inc. And so him and Dan DiDio is the publisher. Frank is also the publisher. They run the company together. And so, for Miller, this is one of those things where like he's the editor for a lot of these up and coming, for artists who've been established, but also up and coming artists like Emma Kubert, who is part of the Kubert
Yeah.
family, like with Andy, Adam, and Joe. She's working with Frank Miller on a comic. Philip Tan was doing the Ronin book. And so they're getting direction from Frank Miller, which I imagine is really fascinating. And so that was a big question for me,
Mm.
which is sort of like, what's it like being an editor? Like you're normally the writer, and so how does that work? And then on the flip side to Dan, it's like, how do you edit Frank Miller?
Mm.
And
Sure.
editing Frank Miller, I imagine that from after interviewing him, editing Frank Miller is like interviewing Frank Miller. You don't really do that. You just let him talk. You just let him go, man. And I mean, but that was so much fun because, like, I imagine he's done so many damn interviews at this point that he's just sort of like, well, what's interesting about this? I'm going to go in this direction,
Mhm.
But it's interesting to hear him talk about it because that is an education in itself.
Yeah. I'm still waiting on. I was hoping when I did my ancestry.com thing, I was hoping that
Mm-hmm.
maybe I would have some sort of correlation or ties to the Kubert family, so I could
Oh,
find
yeah?
like some untapped artistic ability, right? I feel like it's crazy how talented that family is.
Yeah.
Emma Kubert,
Hmm.
she's the daughter of which one, Andy or Adam?
Don't get me lying. I think I want to say Adam, but I can't remember directly. Yeah.
She's a daughter of one of those awesome ass artists, right? And her
Hmm.
abilities are awesome as well. That family is so talented.
Hmm.
Troy, but I'm curious though, from the perspective of someone that has their own, publishing company that dabbles in that doesn't just dabble, but someone that draws and writes. I'm sorry. Let me do that question again. Troy, I'm curious from the perspective of someone that has their own comic publishing company that writes comics that puts them out. Have you ever gotten a piece of advice or maybe like picked up on something during an interview from one of these like awesome creators that changed the way you create comics or work in comics? Like, have you ever just had like a tidbit dropped on you that like just changed your life?
Yeah, I mean, this experience with Diamond and Previous World has been kind of a dream come true in that regard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've gotten to talk to a lot of really great creators who I grew up on, you know?
Hmm.
And, I think the first of those was I did a sit down with John Romita Jr. And, his energy was great. He was just a great person to have a conversation with. He was happy to talk about things I'm sure he's talked about a million times in some other like medium or for some other interviewer. And, it's one of those things where talking to these people who are passionate about it, right? Kind of makes you really grateful for the experience that you're having, you know, for the chance to be working in this industry, for the chance to be working with storytellers and people who are so highly imaginative. And I think that, like, not to drag people too much, but like, you go on Twitter, right, or wherever, and you'll see a lot of comic creators complaining, right? And I understand that, look, compensation's not great in this
Yeah.
industry. If you're working for one of the big two, like creator rights are an issue. I understand that, like uh, the notion of starting some sort of union is probably something that's very important for people, and I don't think there's anything wrong with any of these things. But it's really easy to kind of get bogged down into the Jack Kirby's of the world. And that's not to knock Jack Kirby, but I have noticed that people who love Jack Kirby have a very cynical approach a very cynical perspective on the industry, and it's totally valid.
Yeah.
Like, we could talk about what happened to the creators of Superman. We could talk about what happened to Bill Finger. It's totally valid, right? But then, you do that. You have those. You see those conversations online. It's really easy to kind of be like, man, comics kind of suck, don't they? But then here's the thing. Here's the thing. Then you talk to someone like Garth Ennis, and he tells you that Alan Moore told him, "Hey, do these commercial projects so you can do whatever the hell you want to do."
Hmm.
You know, and you're sort of like, "Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's an avenue. That makes sense." Like, that makes sense to me. So you kind of have to use the system to your advantage and not be a victim of the system, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe that has been the eye-opening experience for me doing some of these interviews, is that you see people who are navigating the system to their advantage because of what has happened to the Bill Fingers of the world. Ramita, I asked him about his time at Marvel, but I also asked him about his time at Miller World and that transition, like, like to being an independent creator on a book that actually blew up and the freedom of that. Adam Warren, famously, was went to the Kubert School, and I guess his style didn't mesh with the standards of the time, and so he was kind of bummed out by that. But then he went off and made his own thing, and that became its own form of freedom, and it's been empowered. Literally, the book is called Empowered. Um, stuff like, and just so many situations like that
Hmm.
where it's like people talking about navigating the system in an intelligent way. And that has been a big thing for me. Like, I never wanted to be a starving artist. I was never interested in
Yeah.
that. And so, part of the reason I even applied to Diamond in the first place was because I was like, I wanted to navigate the industry intelligently. I'd heard the stories already. I have been hearing more stories since then, about like the nature of this industry when it comes to creators. But you kind of have to look at the sources of inspiration for the people that kind of made it out on
Yeah.
the other side.
Well said, man. This quote comes to mind hearing you say that. I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but it's something like, "We can look at the past and still respect it and pay, respect it, right? But it doesn't mean that we have to repeat the past." And
Oh
I
yeah,
think that
absolutely right.
is the point that we're at now. Is that obviously the stories of your Kirby's and your Schusters and Siegels, like, obviously are still like that, those pains, I guess, are still prevalent, right? Like those warning stories are still prevalent, still strong. Hell, they've impacted the way certain people even like view comics or you know um, interact with it. I think there's definitely a little bit of hesitance, a little bit of like sourness to it,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
you could definitely focus on that because it's fucked up what happened to them.
yeah. Hmm.
But to your point, I like the but I like the perspective of looking at people who are making it now, right? That don't disrespect the past, but like have learned those lessons and utilize that to navigate the industry smartly. To even like I don't know. I guess success is the best form of what is it? Is the best form of like getting back at something, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's the best revenge
There you
is
go,
being
best revenge.
successful. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I like
Yeah,
that you shine a spotlight on that. I like that your inspiration comes from that side of the house because it's so easy
yeah,
to get stuck in like the negativity of comic books. It's historical mishaps and downfalls to even
yeah,
like sometimes the fandom itself can be there's definitely very negative pockets, but
yeah,
there's so much to glean and take away from. I think like creators that are working now, like your John Romita Jr.'s, right? Someone that's been in the industry for years that has
yeah,
was probably working industry when it still wasn't very nice to its creators, right? Like
yeah.
whatever the business contracts were archaic, but he is someone that has lived through so many different ages or periods of comic renaissances, right? Like, think of how
Right.
much he's
Really.
like lived
Yes.
through, and he is someone that has navigated it so well. I think like you got to put a spotlight and champion those folks too. Like
Oh
you have to
yeah,
equally
absolutely.
put a spotlight on the positives and folks doing the damn thing.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Yeah.
I had somebody. I actually had a friend of mine call me who works in comics, and he was like, he works at a shop, and he was like, do you know when it's time to leave? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, like, here's my thing, right? If I never want to get to the point where, and this is what comics, film, this actually happened to me with film a little bit, filmmaking. I never want to get to the point that, like, I dislike the filmmaking because of the interactions I've had. Or I dislike the thing because of the
Mhm.
interactions I've had in that industry. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so there's always somewhere else you can go in that industry, you know, to kind of maintain the purity of the thing that you love. And so I told him that, and he was like, yeah, because I'm starting to get to that point. And I was like, I know. I've been listening to your YouTube channel. You've been real salty lately. You kind of hate everything right now. I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm glad you're realizing it. So, you know, yeah, I want to enjoy this. Like, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, you know, there's plenty of things to be, you know, to be depressed about in the world.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where, like, I don't need that here. I'm not interested in that
Yeah.
at all.
There's plenty of room to switch things up to keep the fun in it. I think it's
Oh
what we're
yeah.
getting at. All right.
Hmm.
Speaking of previews and everything you got going on, I wanted to shift gears and actually look through a little bit of this month's massive
Yeah.
previews catalog, which I've got
Yeah. Yeah.
in physical form here. I don't think I have to do much explaining on what the previews catalog is, especially
Hmm.
to patrons of this show, because they know me and Drew have an ongoing monthly series of episodes where we flip through every month's previous catalog looking for the coolest comic, toys, and merch hitting comic shops. But the fact that I got Troy, the man himself, on the show, I thought maybe I would do a mini version of that segment with Troy.
Okay.
And just in case someone absolutely new is joining us today, Previews is your ultimate guide to comics, graphic novels, and pop culture merchandise available from your local comic book shop. I mean, this catalog is pretty pivotal to a lot of comic shops around the world, I'm sorry, to a lot of comic shops in the nation, all right? It's
Hmm.
a lot of merchandise.
And also outside of the U.S.
Oh,
too. Actually, yeah,
so
yeah.
other so comic international comic shops get the previous
Hmm.
catalog. They order from it as well.
Yep.
You learn
Absolutely.
something new, even as the host. But uh, what was I saying? Oh, the catalog also gives you a chance to read detailed product descriptions and storylines for hundreds of comic books and graphic novels from the top comic publishers in the world. To me, it's the best way to find out what's at comic shops, what's coming and arriving at shops. And the best part is that each issue includes a download code for a free digital version of not only the current month's previews, but also a Marvel previews as well, which is what I'm going to be pulling up on my screen right now. So if you want to see the things we're going to be talking about, switch over to the video version of this episode on YouTube, which is linked in the show notes of the podcast version. So if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, click the YouTube link. So it's a little bit of podcast inception, a lot of like podcast and podcast. All right, let me go
Right.
ahead and share my screen right here. All right, share screen. All right, Troy, do you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so Troy, the homework assignment was, which I feel like you probably
Uh,
this is
I kind of failed at.
you failed at it because you've done it so much, right? It's like it's almost like when you've got like the really smart kid and like English 101 when he's like and he's bored. He's so smart he's bored in it. That's the case here. But the homework
That
assignment.
literally sounds like my educational experience.
So the homework assignment was that that we were both going to flip through this month's previous catalog, and we were going to find three things of interest that caught our eye,
Hmm.
that made us stop and pause and share that with the listeners today. Troy, I'm gonna go ahead and do your list first. You gave me three
Okay.
awesome choices. So let's
Yeah.
start off with this first one here, which was on page 13 of the digital version of previews,
Hmm.
which is I think the full solicitation is in the Marvel previews, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
Marvel, the previous catalog had this here. So it's Blade #1.
Hmm.
What is it
Yes.
about this one right here that caught your eye?
Number one is by Brian Edward Hill, who I think is actually, and I don't want to put, I don't want to like categorize him too much, but I'd say he's actually one of the better black writers working
Hmm.
in comics right now. Brian Edward Hill is doing a Blade book, which to me sounds like perfection. It sounds like an ideal thing. He did a really cool book for Killmonger a few years
Hmm.
ago. He's also worked on shows like Ash vs. Evil Dead, which I love. So he's no stranger to absurd horror tropes. And yeah, I just think this is something that's kind of long overdue. I've been waiting for a proper Blade book by a black creator for a while.
Cool.
And so here's my thing, right? And like, I know that there's been other creators who have worked on Blade, and Blade has had a handful of series that have gone on for a few years, right? But there's something very distinctive about Wesley Snipes playing that character,
Hmm.
and the level of shit talking that Wesley Snipes does in that role, right? And I'm hoping, and I'm thinking, I'm assuming, and I feel that Brian Overhill knows this, and he's really going to tap into that. So outside of him being a great writer, outside of them having a great artist on in Elena Casagrande, I'm looking forward to this new installment of Blade. And I'm imagining that this is something that Marvel Comics tends to lob up whatever the next iteration of the MCU is. So I'm assuming that that's leaning into that in some
I
direction.
think it's a safe bet.
Uh, hmm,
I think it's a safe bet.
yeah.
You can tell. I, I've joked on the show that you can tell what show, what MCU property is going to get announced or is close, to being released by Marvel Comics. What new number
Hmm.
one did they put out? Oh, Moon Knight
Yeah.
number one. They
Hmm.
relaunched the series. All right, well, this series is coming to Disney Plus anytime soon.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, you could
So that's
you could
yeah.
definitely
Sorry. Go
see
ahead.
them building the hype for Blade if they're releasing a brand new series.
Hmm. And like I don't know what the fate of the show is. It seems that the movie actually is. It seems like it's kind of like going in a bunch of different directions. Now there's a writer's strike,
Yeah.
but regardless, I feel like this book is an indication that like Blade is clearly playing a bigger role in the MCU. I
Mhm.
mean, in the Marvel 616 proper. He's an Avenger now. He's been featured in Jason Aaron's Avengers book quite a bit. He's got a daughter now, which I'm a little concerned might be the direction of the movie. Because I don't know. Historically, when they introduce a child late in the game for a character, like it's kind of the sitcom rule, or it's just sort of like, oh, is this the last days of this thing?
Yeah.
But we'll see. But either way, yeah, I'm looking forward to this a lot. I think this is going to be really really badass.
Hell yeah. All right, let's take a look at the second item on your list, which was on page 116. It was Berserker Poetry of Madness number one,
Hmm.
created by Keanu Reeves, written by Steve Scroce, illustrated by
Yeah,
Steve as well, and colors
yeah.
by the one and only Dave Stewart. Which I feel like when you see Dave Stewart as the
Hmm.
colorist on a title, it's a safe bet. It's like a safe investment. That name
Yes.
right there is a product name. It is a
Hmm.
quality name along with Steve
Hmm.
Scroce, obviously. So what is it about
Absolutely.
this one that caught your eye? Outside of the
Uh,
I feel like there's a lot of obviousness to it, but hit us with
right. Yeah. The cover's really cool, right?
it. Yeah.
So actually, I will correct you on something. I am not normally the host of the panel. Normally, that responsibility goes to Anamia, but I did end up hosting one of the episodes recently because she couldn't make it because she got sick, right? That said, and by we I mean myself, Natasha slash Canon Doll X, and Anamia, just did the season finale of the panel, and we did Berserker, the first 5 or 6 issues of the series. Um, and this book kind of really stands itself apart from other quote unquote vanity projects by stars. Number one, because I've seen Keanu Reeves talk this book up in interviews where he's supposed to be doing a press junket for his own movie, right? So that in itself is a little bit different. Like
Yeah.
he seems to really, really dig this book and really dig the idea of comics, which I really appreciate. The first 5 issues of this book really ended on a serious cliffhanger that really left the thing wide open
Mm.
for a much bigger, much bolder interpretations of this character. And long story short, he's immortal. He can't die, and he's been alive for a very long time. And so this book seems to be leaning into this notion that, like, yes, he has been alive for a very long time. He's seen a lot of shit. And one of those things he's seen is the ancient realm of Atlantis. And so the idea of Steve Scrose doing a book with Keanu Reeves that's going to be kind of a sword and sorcery adventure tale in Atlantis with this particular character is really enticing. And beyond that, I just think it's cool that it's a one shot. I think that's really awesome that it's like a kind of a one and done.
Oh yeah.
And I also got to point out this is a reunion of sorts between Keanu Reeves and Steve Scrose because Steve Scrose was the storyboard artist on The
That's
Matrix.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Man,
So, mhm.
Man, that I hadn't had a chance to read through the solicitation for this one, but I am completely sold. And the fact
Yeah,
they're respecting my time and my money with it being a one shot,
one shot,
oh
right?
yeah, man, sign me the hell up.
Right, exactly. Yep.
And I want to give also a big shout out. You mentioned some of your co-hosts on the panel, but I want to give a big shout out to another one of your co-hosts, Ashton Greenwood,
Yeah.
who does the Previews Weekly show with you. Big
Mhm.
shout out to her. She helped me get in touch with Joe Field over
Yeah.
at Flying Colors Comics. We had such a great conversation about Free Comic Book Day a few episodes ago. So big shout out to Ashton.
No, Ashton's great. Ashton's great. You should have Ashton on.
I was
She's a lot of fun to talk
I
to. I
was
talk to her every week.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was like, you know what? Ashton would be a great guest on the show. So I'm gonna reach out to Ashton. We'll get her on the show as well. All right,
Absolutely.
Troy, one more for you, man. All right, so your
Yes.
last pick was on page 290, and it is the Ribbon Queen that is being published by AWA Studios, written by Garth Ennis, penciled by is that Jason Burrows? Is that how you say his name?
Maybe Jason. Actually, that one I'm not too sure on.
All right, tell us about this one right here, Ribbon Queen number 1 of 8.
It's Garth Ennis. And I have I definitely love when he tackles horror more directly. Like Garth Ennis is fun when he's like playing with like the dark comedy elements, like stuff like The Boys.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he really excels at war stories, crime stories, and horror stories. And this just so happens to be at least a horror story and a crime story at the same time. It's about a serial killer, and the possibility that one of the rescue team that saved her, saved a character from that serial killer might be actually the serial killer himself. And so yeah, I'm very curious about the direction of this. Like I said, Ennis did a book called A Walk Through Hell,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of reinvigorated and reinforced my opinion of him as a writer in terms of his ability to do crime and horror, which that book definitely is. It's kind of easy to kind of forget that that's kind of what Preacher was in a lot of ways. And, he's done a lot of, he's done some of the best Punisher stuff, like ever, like for that character.
Oh yeah.
And those are all like great variations of the crime genre. And so it's really cool to kind of see him do something original in that space. Also, Jason Burrows has been somebody I've been a big fan of since he did Simon Spector with Warren Ellis way back when.
Hmm.
I've been a big fan of his. He actually did a Punisher book with Ennis not too long ago too, which was actually pretty good. So yeah, I'm all in on this. I'm probably going to end up getting all 8 issues every single month.
Solid lineup. Look, folks, if there's anyone that you should take recommendation from when it comes to comics, it's my man Troy here, right? Because he lives and breathes the previous catalog. So
Yeah.
fantastic lineup right there, Troy. All right, let me
Thank you.
share with you mine here. I kind of diversified
Yeah,
mine
let's see
here
him.
because there's too much. There's so much cool shit in the
There's
previews.
so much. Yeah.
I think I joked when we had our episode 2 years ago that there was a point where I was too broke to buy comic books every week that some months I would just buy the previews and that would kind of crave my itch for
Yeah.
looking at new comic books.
Yeah,
So,
no, definitely guilty of that. I had those moments too in the past. Yeah.
all right, so I decided to go comic. I think I've got a book and a toy on here. So the first one that piqued my interest is this.
Yeah.
Speaking of Mark Miller right here, he's got a new limited series called Big Game number 1 of 5, and it looks like it's got my guy Pepe Larez, which I mean you
Yes.
can do no wrong with him. They don't have not a lot to go off from this from the cover because it looks like they've got it all censored. But I love the solicitation being essentially like a Millerverse, big crossover. It
Yeah.
sounds here. It reads, does the crossover really go that wide? Yes, it does. Big Game pulls together Kick-Ass, Kingsman, Nemesis, The Magic Order, and all the Miller World franchises in one special event. Yo, sign me the fuck up.
Yeah. Sign me up.
Right? Like, I love
Right.
all those titles. They all stand out on their own strongly. And, if he's putting them all together in one book, the amount of insanity that is about to be in these 5 issues.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
I'm way into this. Yeah. I like this idea. Again, he's jumped in and he's like kind of taking the reins of the industry and saying, him and McFarlane are both like, no, this is how you make comics.
Damn
And I
right.
love that.
This is how you make comics, and this is how you sell them. This is how you sell them to people, to the consumers. This is how you sell them
Yes.
to TV companies and big companies and toys, man. Yeah, talk about like some acute businessmen in comic books.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And you know what? I am mistaken. So they don't have the covers solicited, but they do have some of the interior
Just some
black and
interiors.
white. And
Yeah,
dude, he's Pepe Larraz is one of the best out.
he's
Dude,
great. Yeah,
so good.
he's
So
great. Yeah.
yeah, I'm digging Mark Millar just poaching these like fantastic artists from like other companies. So that was the first one on my list. That one's got my attention big time. The next one is on page 78, which happens to be Good Comics for Bad People, an extra fabulous collection. Story art and
Yeah.
cover by Zach M. Stafford. He is all right. This is a perfect example of a web strip or comic creator that I have followed on Instagram for
Okay.
years. Like I see his comics shared all the time on Instagram. They're absurd. They are witty. They are funny. They're a little dark as well. But the fact that he's putting them all to putting it looks sounds like not only all the ones that you've probably seen on Instagram or on social media, but some extra behind the scenes stuff and unreleased ones in one book is great. You know, like this is something. You know how like social media, right? We always complain about the algorithms. I don't get to see my friends' posts. I don't get to see the posts that I want to
Yeah.
see. Right. This is a prime example of I have not seen this posted or him promoting this on his socials.
Mm,
If I have, maybe I've just kind of mindlessly been scrolling. But the fact that Previews put a spotlight on this,
mm.
I've already pre-ordered it as well. So really looking forward to this book big time.
I have to check that out. Yeah, I was curious about that based just on the title, so I'm into it.
They don't tell me his strips always got me cracking up, man. They. It's like where the fuck does this dude get his ideas from? So I get to get all of that in a big oversized book. Hell yeah! All right, and last but not least, look, I love flipping through previews,
Mhm.
but I especially love flipping through the toy section
Oh yeah,
of
the toy
previews. All
section.
right,
Yeah.
it's like
Mhm.
I can't afford half this shit, but the wish list I form in my head every month, oh man,
Mhm.
if it could only become reality. So I am a fucking fighting games, hyper fan. I'm not very good
Mhm.
at all of them, but I
Mhm.
love me some good fighting games. And I seen this Tekken 7 Devil Jin figure in
Mhm.
the toy section of previews. Dude, what can I say, man? When they
Mhm.
decide to make hyper articulate, well produced figures of like fighting game characters,
Mhm.
I'm a suck. I'm a mark for this stuff, man. And Devil
Yeah,
Jin
absolutely.
is a character that has lived with me since like middle school days. I remember playing him in
Nice.
what was he? Was it Tekken 3? I think you first see him in like Tekken 3 or something. But
Mhm.
one of the coolest fucking characters out there. You're telling me he's a
Mhm.
devil and an angel, and all of his like daddy issues and mom issue. Like Jin
Right,
is
right.
so emo, and I love it, man. So to see them come out with like this half scale or 1/12 scale figure, it's supposed to be super articulate. It's from the company from Bluefin, which makes
Bluefin. Okay. Yeah.
really good toys out there. So
Yeah, yeah. Not a month goes by, like not a month, where I don't see some sort of Capcom,
oh
Street
man.
Fighter, SNK figure like in this catalog, and I'm like, ooh, how much is it?
And that's usually where
Yeah.
that's usually where it stops for me. Because some of them
Hmm.
toys be
Oh
so
yeah.
awesome, and then you're like, damn, yeah, that's got to be a
Hmm.
good toy because the price is insane. But this
Yeah,
one,
I'm sure the articulation's crazy.
yeah, for sure. This one's not too crazy, and this one might be very tempting. This is like
Hmm.
in that price range where it's like, oh, that's doable. That's
That's doable,
doable.
all right? Yeah, that might be doable. But then you also run into. But I don't know about you. I don't know if you can see the robots over my shoulder here. That's been my new thing lately, and like it's a weird thing because I talk a lot about how I hate AI, but like I do collect these robot figures. I got another one just sitting right here, and these are all from the
Yeah.
freaking catalog from like that's from Joy Toy,
Oh.
and yeah, and they have some stuff in the
Mm.
catalog every single month that makes me like, oh my god, what is this?
Hold
So
up, man.
yeah,
I gotta. All right, I'm gonna go off track a little bit because
yeah, yeah.
this is probably a perfect amalgam of some of the things we talked about. You just brought up robots. You also
Hmm.
mentioned how much you love whatnot, and
Hmm.
I'm sure that you're familiar with
Oh yeah,
the Astrobots
Astrobots. Yep,
series, comic series. I think it just came out actually this week,
just
and
came out this week.
and
Yeah,
I'm drawing a blank on the name of the writer, but he's a big deal. Like he wrote Transformers for Marvel, like
yeah.
huge into
It's
the robot mech space, but he's writing it.
yeah,
Um,
Simon Fraser.
thank you, Simon Fraser.
Yeah. Hmm.
Tell me why whatnot is coming from my pockets. Not only are they
Yeah,
dropping the comic series,
legit.
but
Yeah.
they've got action figures for it, man. Like,
Oh, they do.
yeah, this is the main character Apollo.
I mean, the action figures out because I knew it was based on an action figure line, but I wasn't sure that they were out
Well, they
already or
made their
not.
own action figure line to drop which is so 80s, right? Like how many 80s
Yeah,
cartoons,
right.
had a cartoon because they needed to sell the toys. So this is interesting that it's like we're going to make our own toy line and also put out a comic book. That's some to me. I love that line of thinking, right? Like
Oh yeah,
thinking
absolutely.
outside of
Yeah.
just the classic, thinking outside the borders of panels. So
The
yeah,
the medium is the message, man.
yeah, Troy, I don't want to also put you in a situation where you're buying every single figure, but robots, astrobots, whatnot. I mean, come
Yeah.
on.
Also, shout out to I think his name is Hector Tunick, the artist on that, because he does some amazingly detailed artwork on that book as well.
Hmm. That's good stuff. Yeah, I'll have to check them
Hmm.
out. But folks, that is our top three picks from this month's previews catalog. If you want to learn more about how previews came to be or the role they play, the very important role they play in comic shops and in the lives of comic fanboys like myself, check out Troy's first appearance in episode 319 of the Short Box. I guarantee you'll have a new sense of appreciation for these massive, nerdy phone books. All right, we really went into more
Yeah.
detail in that episode there. But Troy, and kind of getting close to wrapping up, and on the topic of previews, I mentioned that me and my co-host Drew, we've been doing like these monthly previews catalog flip through and wish list episodes. We just flip through the catalog. We'll talk about certain things that caught our eye. We'll make this massive wish list that we could only dream of owning. But
Mhm.
the reality though is I have been put on to some awesome like comics and different indie publishers. I mentioned a few of them earlier, but I've been introduced to, things that I probably would not have found on my own had it not
Right.
been for like the previous catalog. Like, for
Mhm.
example, there's a comic series by Mad Cave called Don't Spit in the Wind. It looks amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found this Astro Boy prequel manga that was being published by Titan Manga, which is a new company to
Mhm.
me. It's called Adam. I have now purchased like all 4 volumes because it's awesome. And then I've been put on to like companies like Comic Experience Publishing. Just the different things I've
Mhm.
been
Mhm.
getting
Yeah.
into because of these monthly episodes, which we've been doing for like
Right.
6 to 7 months. It's still kind of new, but it's now like a mainstay thing that we do on the show. So I'm curious to hear from you. What's the last like really exciting comic or new creator or creative team that you've recently come across or been made aware of because of like the previews catalog? Like, does a title, book, or creator come to mind? That you were introduced to because of the catalogs?
Man. Man, that's a good question. I feel like every month I kind of like find something new. Um. Yeah. I don't want to. I mean, I mentioned Lovesick,
Hmm.
who is, and that's Luana Vecchio, who, like, if she hadn't gone in this grindhouse category, gone into this direction of grindhouse type of comics, I probably would not have checked out her work previous to that. But she's a great artist.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. Miller. I mentioned the Mark Miller thing. Jerry Dugan has this crazy book called Kaiju, which is
Oh,
like a kaiju. It's like a horny kaiju comic.
yeah, that was one. That was the one I was
Y-
put on. That was put on my radar.
yeah.
Last month. Really good.
um, like I got put onto this thing. I haven't read it yet, but I am curious about it. I got put onto this thing called Galaseum,
Hmm.
which is by Yasushi Baba, which is like a manga, and that seems kind of nuts. So that seems like a wild, wild book. Um,
I,
man, yeah,
I will say previews. Obviously, I'm always going to look at the comic section first,
right.
but I get really excited when I get into like the middle of it when it's like graphic novels and the books because some of the
Hmm.
graphic novels like the comic strip book that I mentioned, right? Like
Hmm.
that isn't something that I would probably like. That would probably be a risk, or something that my comic shop probably would not order on their own. That'd probably be something that would
Right.
be a special order. And I
Yeah.
find the graphic novel section of previous catalog my favorite because I'm being put on to really interesting manga or
Mhm.
Toshin coffee table books that I would
Yeah.
not have probably found out in the wild. So I
Right.
do love the range of variety of
Mhm.
cool shit that I can go spend my money on, right? I love that
Yeah,
between the graphic novels and then the toys from like Japan and the exclusives. Like,
yeah.
yeah, you guys are killing my wallet. All right, that's fine. I say all that to say that.
Actually, you just remind me of something. Behemoth, who is now Sumerian Comics,
Hmm.
they're a company that like kind of caught my attention a few like about early last year. They have a bunch of books by E. E. Pliskin, including Heavy Metal Drummer, and another book called Purple Oblivion is pretty wild. Those books are pretty crazy. They also put a book out called How I Became a Shoplifter, which was really entertaining. It's like a teen angst like early 2000s like comic about like basically these delinquents, juvenile delinquents. And it's just it's something different, like especially if like you're somebody who's been reading a lot of cape shit lately, like like this is a definitely doubly just as entertaining, and it's just a different type of energy and a different type of vibe, which I really appreciate. Again, I'm a Vertigo guy. So, like I got back into comics because of Vertigo and early Marvel, so or early 2000s Marvel. So a lot of the stuff I'm looking for is kind of chasing that high again.
Hell
You
yeah,
know?
hell
Yeah.
yeah. Troy, I'm going to give you one more question because I
Yeah.
know the listener right now that is, I know right now there is a listener that is suffering tremendous hand cramps trying to jot down every single title that they're thrown at them and recommending them, all of
Yeah.
which I definitely recommend. If you're looking for something new, give some of these titles that we're mentioning a shot. Troy, what piece of advice would you give to Troy, what piece of advice would you give to an aspiring comic creator based on something you wish you would have known prior to starting your own career in comics? And I'll go ahead and extend that if you don't mind. Not only just maybe comic creator, but maybe someone that's looking to dabble into the world of like comic content creation or doing a YouTube channel in the same vein as some of the things you do with previews. Like any advice that at the top of your head?
I mean, I think the simplest thing is just to do it. Like, I don't mean to be all Shia LaBeouf here, but like, just do it, man. Like, it's, I had a conversation with someone recently about how much they're just now realizing that just initiating is such a huge hurdle,
Hmm.
and like so much of what they didn't so much of why they didn't start in the first place was because they were concerned about what people would think, or it wasn't good enough, or at the very least it wasn't the thing that they wanted it to be. And I'm like, well, that's going to happen regardless. Like, you know what I mean? Like, some people aren't going to like it, some people are going to say it's not good enough, and the first thing you make is not going to be the thing. It's not going to be your war and peace.
Hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? It's not going to be the great thing that transforms the industry and launches 1,000 careers. That's just not going to happen, right? Um, but it's important to just kind of like just cut your teeth on it, man. Just start doing it. Like, I had a comic called Bam, that truthfully has never been finished. And that's kind of a frustration of mine because I know exactly how it's supposed to end. you know, but I wrote it, and my buddy Jay Payne drew it. We moved it over to Webtoons at one point, and it's kind of sitting there unfinished because I started making other comics, like But at the end of the day, I'm sort of like, at least I started it. Like, I got like about 7 issues into that thing, um, before ultimately, we just kind of slowed down and just never regained the momentum again. Hopefully, we will soon,
Hmm.
eventually, because it'd be nice to just finish it. But I'm glad that I just started. Like, you know what I mean? It was because of just starting that book and just making that book, as rough as it might have been, that I was able to get other opportunities to make other comics. I was able to make shorts. I was able to make this book called District Comics, which is an unconventional history of Washington D.C., which ended up being like an award nominee. It was an anthology book I get. It was all just because I just started doing them. Like, people are going to tell you, oh, the artwork sucks, or oh, like, this isn't written well. And let me, yeah, okay, fine. But you just got to start. So just start.
Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Troy, I got actually one more question for before I ask
Yeah.
for any shameless plugs. But as someone so in tune and close to the pulse of the comic industry, what are your thoughts on the state of comics? And I know that could be a loaded question, but maybe you could
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of liquefy that into something short and sweet. But we've seen so much change and development since we last spoke. Just like talking about our last conversation, these last 2 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
change, right? Like this year alone, IDW's failing stock, Disney
Mhm.
massive Disney layoffs. They also gave Ike Perlmutter the boot, which I think is kind of like
Yeah,
the one
it's
good thing out of all
wild.
that. And then it feels like every month we hear about a new comic publishing company being formed or making a name for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, have these things made you excited and optimistic, or are you more cautious and concerned about the direction of the industry and where it's going?
Well, I think, like I mentioned before, I think that the industry in general, there was a lot of, let's diversity copycats happening a few years ago.
Mhm.
And, I've gotten flack for this, but like, I just wasn't with a lot of them. Don't get me wrong, there was plenty that were doing great things, right? But, a lot of what I was seeing was just kind of really inauthentic. And that's not to say that necessarily my perspective of diversity is the right one, but I can also kind of tell when it's not servicing the people that it's supposed to be representing,
Hmm.
right? And you know that was a thing, and that went on for like a good 4 years, I want to say. And I think that we've transitioned out of that into a much healthier industry, where there's a more there's more diversity in comics now, and we had to go through that ugly phase to get to that point. I think that's the other part that I need to point out, that I need to emphasize. But there's also a wider range of material out there now.
Hmm.
Like, I think at one point in time, everybody was trying to apply this to just superheroes. You know what I mean? And now we're at a point where it's like you got slice of life, we've got comedy, we've got horror, we've got, thrillers, we've got drama, and it's like it's a wide spread of things that kind of shows the range of what creators of all backgrounds can do, and we're not being, for lack of a better term, ghettoized in the way that we were a few years ago.
Hmm.
And I think that's very healthy. But just also in terms of the industry as a whole, right? Not just like, for creators of certain backgrounds, but just the industry as a whole. I think things are really cool right now. I think a lot of people have been making a big stink about like, oh, comic shops aren't doing this and comic shops are doing that. You know, I think you're missing the point. Is that now we're at a point where comics are not just one avenue. I love comic shops. I have two comic shops that I go to on a regular. Like, you know what I mean? But that's not to say that I don't just love comics in general, right? And any way I can get them is a good time for me. like, so I love that I can go to Artist Alley and get comics. I love that I can go digitally and get comics. I love that I can go on my Facebook feed and get comics. Like, I love that I can go to the comic shop and get comics. And I love that there's so many different types of comics out there right now. And to me, that's a healthy industry.
Hmm.
Like, I think that's a very healthy industry. And I think people get too wrapped up in what comic shops are doing right now. And, I think that, like, there's a lot of people that, like, are going back to, like, oh, the 90s were so great because of this and that and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, but the 90s also had a breaking point. like, and it came pretty fast, actually, when you really think about it.
Yeah.
Like, what we were doing in the 90s was not a long term strategy, it was a short term strategy. And there was a burst, right? And I think that what's happening in the industry right now is a long term strategy that has healthier implications
Hmm.
down the line. And I think that's really great. Like, everybody's like, oh, we're going to do a show in a couple weeks about manga versus comic books, right? Well, here's the thing, and I mean, spoiler alert, manga are comic books.
Well said.
like,
I've been seeing that
that
one too.
little spoiler alert there, manga are comic books. And so if manga's healthy, comic books are healthy, guys, and we
Hmm.
need to get past this like us versus them mentality. I'm kind of over it. I think that there's plenty of room here for everybody. They don't do this in movies. They don't do this in television. Like, nobody's sitting there saying like, oh, you know, sitcoms are better than, I don't even know. Sitcoms are better than Law and Order or something like that. They don't do that there, right?
Yeah.
So why are we doing this here?
Well said, man. Well said. Comic books are growing up, and I applaud the different distribution methods and the different titles, the different It really feels like it's trying to become something for everyone.
Yeah.
And you hinted at like it's it's you can get it here, you can get it everywhere, and
Mhm.
I feel like it's breaking its old mold, like the
Hmm.
old mold, the old stigma that came with it, the old attitude that came with it, the expectations. Because I mean, I've been collecting so long. There was a period where you say comics in your mind, and the expectation and the attitude was
Hmm.
just your superheroes, your capes, your big two. And I feel
Right.
like that has changed now, where you can say comics and it might be something from Image, maybe a manga, maybe a webtoon or something
Hmm.
like that. Now I feel like it's cast a much wider net. And to your point, I
Hmm.
think that's definitely a lot more healthy because it's not so hyper focused in one environment now.
Right. No, it isn't. And I think that that ultimately has benefits down the line. Like if
Yeah.
you're a shop that's carrying superheroes, manga, slice of life stuff,
Mhm.
humor, if you're carrying all these things, that's beneficial to you as well.
Well said. Well said. Troy, I enjoy hearing you. I enjoy hearing you wax poetics about comic books and the industry, and I definitely look forward to having you on again at some point, and also extending the invite out to the rest of your previous crew, especially Ashton. We'll have her on
Yeah.
hopefully here in the next couple of months. But
Hmm.
Troy, I'm gonna have links to your socials. I have some of the comics you recommended in the show notes as well. I'll obviously have links to RexCo, so that way people can stay up to date with what you got going on there. But
Cool.
do you care to share anything else with the listeners? Any upcoming projects, special announcements, et cetera, et cetera? Shameless plug away, please.
I would say definitely go to rexco-comics.com and check out what we've got going on. We're really emphasizing giving people a premium experience. And so when you order something from Rexco, you're not just getting the thing you ordered,
Hmm.
you're getting a story. And that comes from several directions that I think are where we really kind of applaud the consumer for going to our website and participating in this conversation we're
Hmm.
having. And we try to make sure that the conversation continues beyond that purchase with material that also comes with whatever you buy from our store. And so I think that's something that like you should definitely check out. Also, pick up a Create the Culture sticker, man. Pick up one from the website and you'll be pleasantly surprised by what comes with it. And, put it somewhere that's inconvenient for somebody.
I think I'm a,
you know?
I think I'm a cop a few, put them
Yeah.
around Jack's, but I think I got a couple of comic conventions in my future. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do a little old school sticker bomb.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, go for it, man. Throw it on the stop sign, throw it on your laptop, throw it underneath the toilet seat if you need to. Like, whatever works for you, go for it.
There we go.
This is a reminder to everybody.
Hell yeah. Troy, this has been a pleasure. I want you to enjoy the rest of your day and don't be a stranger, all right? We definitely got to have
Absolutely.
you back on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.